Georgia is soft around the edges, pine shade, red clay that remembers yesterday's rain. Porch boards that groan like friendly dogs. John Henry Holliday first opened his eyes into that light August. 1851, Fayetteville by some almanacs. Soon griffin by memory's more comfortable chair. A father who had served and understood rules. Mother who tuned rooms with kindness and a hymn. The boy learned scales before he learned cards. Piano under fingers that would one day hold a pistol steady and a glass less steady. Latin and geometry at a small desk where sunlight and dust shared the hour. He was delicate in build and sharp in mind. People said polite first, then noticed the posture straight as a new fence. When his mother fell ill and slipped away, he carried quiet heavier than before. Grief teaches a lad to listen harder. Books lifted him toward a city he had only traced on maps. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery, clean halls, lectures with diagrams precise enough to make confidence possible. He learned the careful work of easing pain, how to ask a jaw to trust him, how to make tools seem smaller than they were. A diploma in 1872. John Henry Holliday, DDS. Not a nickname yet, not a legend, just a young man with neat handwriting and a skill the world would always need. He returned to Georgia and hung his shingle like a proud note on a door. Patience came. He worked with the calm hands that had made professors nod. But a cough began to practice its own lessons. At first it was an interruption, then it was a habit, then it brought blood, consumption, tuberculosis. Words doctors spoke softly because patience did better work than panic. They told him drier air might help. West, if he could manage it, he could. He took the road like a man learning a new instrument. Dallas, young city with streets that practiced being streets. He tried dentistry there for a season. He set up a chair where the light was good and the door easy for nervous feet to find. But coughs sit in the room like uninvited relatives. Patients hesitate when a man leans away to spare them. Routines unravel. Cards, though, cards are indifferent to coughs. They care only for attention and odds. Doc, by then the nickname fit as well as any, discovered he could read a table the way he read a patient. Posture, breath, hands that fidgeted like lies. At night he dealt faro for wages. He learned to win enough to pay for mornings. He traded a dentist S-drill for a gambler S-rake without making a speech about it. West Texas pulled like dry wind. Fort Griffin, Llanos where sun and grass learned each other's patience. Saloon light is a small weather unto itself, lamps, voices without secrets. Coins expressing themselves on felt. There he met a woman who would be a storm and a shelter by turns. Mary Catherine Heroni, called Kate, called Big Nose Kate by people who liked labels, called friend by a man who didn't keep many. Doc's cough got worse on bad days, quieter on good ones. His temper had its own climate, cold when insulted, warm when loyalty pulled a chair for it. He learned a knife because closed spaces made it necessary. He learned a derringer because jackets sometimes had to be honest about their pockets. He was not the fastest gun in all the papers. He was quick enough and exact, and as deadly as the moment required when the moment refused every other offer. Kate, Fort Griffin, and the favor that found a friend named Wyatt. A poker hand, a dead man on the floor, a fire behind a jail. 8 tall cans and walking into a saloon where trouble had already chosen a corner. Fort Griffin slept lightly. Buffalo hunters, teamsters, scouts who preferred their own advice, proprietors who learned balance sheets and brawls together. Doc dealt in won, dealt in lost, kept his back not always to a wall, but always to sense. He liked the hum of a good night, cards moving like small birds, voices landing without claws. A quarrel over table rules became a killing they argued about after. Whether the dead man drew first, whether the dealer warned twice. But dead is a hard status to edit. Doc was arrested. Kate moved like weather when she needed to. She set a fire behind a wood building and manufactured a distraction that offended the night enough to help. In the smoke and shout, she brought a pistol to bear and a key to work, and Doc walked through the sudden door she had made. They left Fort Griffin with the kind of hurry that makes even a cough forget itself. The trail, Dodge City, where the railroad taught the wind new tempos, and cattle towns traded silence for coins. In Dodge, a lawman had been quietly inventing a posture that could calm a room without borrowing a bullet. Wyatt Earp, long coat, strong jaw, voice that did not need to raise itself because the rest of him had already spoken. He and Doc recognized something in each other the way two tools from different trades recognize steel. The famous story says Doc once stepped in when a gang was stepping out of line and Wyatt was about to be surrounded. Whether the details line up perfectly or not, the friendship did. Wyatt thanked him in a language Doc respected, not with flourishes, but with room at the table and room at his back. Doc was not easy company for men who needed easy. He drank because sleep was not always available. He talked sharp because dull was a waste of minutes a sick man does not have. He was loyal the way a keystone is loyal, quiet, load-bearing, unnoticed until it is missing. Dodge taught him new economies, how to stay out of jail when you're always one loud second from it, how to switch chairs before an argument chooses yours as the stage. News drifted down from Arizona, silver in the hills, towns raising frames fast as card hands, brothers named Earp heading that way with plans and the kind of stubborn that agrees with hard country. Doc followed in the style of men who do not admit they are following anyone. He rode because the air was drier, because the stakes were higher, because the one man he trusted most said the road might need both of them again. The road to Tombstone Faro boxes, Bell's office, and a street with rules, a new boom town. Habits carried forward. Doc's cough riding shotgun while his wood kept the rest of him employed. Tombstone had the energy of a story midway through its best paragraph. Or his wagons. Miners who counted veins and dreams and argued samples in daylight. Lawyers sniffing at deeds. Saloons writing their own constitution. Doc took a chair at the Oriental's Faro layout. Steady hands. Impartial rake. An eye that could walk the whole room while appearing to study only the deck. He was not a clean liver. He was a clean dealer. Men respect at least one of those when their money is at stake. Ike Clanton's talk made holes in the air. Tom and Frank McClory stood the way men stand when their boots are always half turned toward country they trust more than sidewalks. Johnny Ringo wore his education like a knife, useful, shiny, likely to make a point that hurt. County Sheriff John Behan smiled public smiles. City Marshal Virgil Earp did the work behind them. I kept the balance without asking for the badge unless the day insisted. Doc's cough commented from his ribs. He quieted it with whiskey because doctors out here prescribed the same medicine without the honesty. He gambled with care and fought with precision, which reduced the number of nights he lost. Rumors raveled through the town like yarn without a cat, who robbed a stage, who looked the other way, who held a badge and a grudge in the same pocket. Wyatt's calm made enemies impatient. Doc's presence made them rash. When an ordinance said check your guns inside town limits, Virgil meant it. Doc supported meaning with a presence that discouraged the kind of misinterpretation some men call liberty. On the morning the sky chose for thunder, Doc was not ill enough to stay in bed nor sober enough to pretend to like his enemies. He fell into step beside Wyatt and Morgan. Virgil carried the day like a shield. They walked toward a lot behind a corral whose name would get the headlines. While the shooting actually happened on Fremont Street, Doc had a shotgun under his coat. Because sometimes the sickest man carries the heaviest instrument. 30 seconds Doc's shot. The line in the dust and the months that followed. You're a daisy if you do, a smoke-thick street. Then hearings, ambushes. Pride that kept moving because stopping was an option the living seldom chose. Throw up your hands, Virgil said. Frank McClory might have smiled. Billy Clanton likely didn't. Ike wanted to be unarmed and armed at the same time, the most dangerous posture there is. Doc lifted the shotgun and answered Tom McClory's motion with enough lead to rearrange a sentence. Fragments later, he offered a remark that newspapers loved so much. They stopped checking whether he had said it exactly that way. You're a daisy if you do. What he meant was simpler. Don't. 30 seconds. Bullets in the laundry of the air. Wyatt untouched. Virgil and Morgan carrying iron they hadn't planned to carry. Doc grazed and grinning like a man who refuses to grant pain a larger role than necessary. The hearings were long where the fight had been short. Judge Spicer weighed testimony like or separating shine from dirt, issuing his finding with measured words that satisfied no one, completely justified under the law. But law is not a bandage for grief. Nights lengthened. Virgil was maimed on a street that would apologize if streets could. Morgan was murdered in a billiard hall where Greenfield didn't deserve the memory it got. The Earps gathered sorrow, and horses in a sense that if they didn't he move, the next act would be written by other hands. Doc rode with Wyatt on the vendetta that followed the federal deputies writ in a pocket, a private list, and a heart. Near the spring in the wash where Curly Bill had laughed at weather for years, bullets argued until one of them wrote his name in vital ink. Stories tie ribbons where none were needed and claimed Doc killed Ringo too. The tree where Ringo died offers no opinion. Doc did not brag. He spent his breath on coughing and loyalty instead. By 1882, the Arizona season had ended its page. Doc and Wyatt pointed their shadows elsewhere. Colorado's air felt thinner and kinder at once. Denver's roams understood gambling and discretion. Doc's arrest there, at the urging of old enemies who mailed their grudges across state lines, turned into a small civics lesson, governors disagreeing, sheriffs hesitating, Wyatt lobbying. Extradition denied. Doc breathed easier, if that phrase can be used for a man counting his breaths like coins. Leadville's winter, Glenwood's steam. A gentleman's last joke, a small shooting that didn't kill its man. A colder cough. A sanatorium where mineral water argued with time. Bare feet, a smile. And the line people keep repeating because it sounds right. Leadville sat high and sharp in the 1880s, a city of roofs and resolve under an altitude that corrected people who lied about their stamina. Doc gambled there, kept mostly to himself, fell into a quarrel with a man named Billy Allen over a small debt that had practiced being larger in the imaginations of both men. They met on a cold day in '84. Doc moved first, because a sick man knows that hesitation is a luxury healthy men can afford. Allen lived. Doc was tried and acquitted, a jury deciding that a man with half a lung and far fewer friends than enemies had been as prudent as he could be given the hour. After that, the cough revised his calendar. Glenwood Springs, hot vapors, curative hopes, rooms where windows collected condensation and men collected their loose minutes and tried to make them into hours. He lay at the sanatorium, thin as a page, sometimes cheerful, sometimes not. Kate visited by some accounts, by others sent letters that warmed the room without opening the door. Wyatt's news traveled slowly but warmed too. On a November morning in 1887, Doc looked at his bare feet beyond the blanket's edge, considered the odds he had always considered so well, and laughed softly. "This is funny," he said, "so they say, because he had always expected boots." He was 35. Rome got quiet the way rooms do around a man who has been louder than his reputation and gentler than his enemies admitted. What remains of him that helps us sleep? The friendship that held like a well-set tooth. The wit that took some of the sting out of a life that would have stung double otherwise. The accuracy with cards, with guns. The reading rooms that saved louder men from making more noise than a town could bear. If stories inflated him, it is because bars prefer helium to gravity. If stories shrink him, it is because some writers do not like the sick to be brave. We keep him as he likely wished, a working professional in hard trades, a loyal friend, a man who held himself together with whiskey and stubbornness long enough to change the shape of a few afternoons forever. From Doc's chair by the window we can see a boy in New Mexico whose legend will run hotter in younger, quick hands. A tilt to the head like mischief. A name that learned to be a headline and a pursuit at the same speed, Billy the Kid. And the man who would follow him through night country, Pat Garrett. We will braid them next chronologically enough to honor cause and effect, softly enough that the roan keeps its hush.